Hello. Peanut and melon cultures. In our previous videos we talked about how the refugee needs new relationships to help to heal his broken heart. But there's a problem, because the culture in which the refugee grew up, in which he had his relationships, is very different from our culture. The way things work in our society is just like the difference between a melon culture and a peanut culture. As we saw before, the refugee in his home country, his home culture, probably had hundreds of relationships in what I would call a melon culture. And yet we in the West, his new culture that he's coming into, is what I would describe as a peanut culture, which is quite different. What do I really mean by that? You see, our society is like a collection of families, each nut or each shell here representing one family unit. And we are all together in the same bowl, we're all together in the same society. But if we look at, we'll go within a shell, within each hard shell, we find the nuts. So there's only two nuts for peanuts. In normal families here in the West, there's normally more than two. But the point is that there is a shell between our family and another family. There's a separation between us. It's important to understand that in the West, we put that type of shell around our nuclear family. Most people do it. It just seems normal to us. Our food belongs to us. Don't expect us to share it with anybody else. Our money belongs to us. Don't expect us to share it with anybody else. Our house belongs to us. You don't come in if you aren't invited. So if we look at the whole society, it looks something like this. Lots of individual families, all surrounded by their own shell. Of course, we often have other families which are closely related to us, like those with the same grandparents, like your uncle's family and your auntie's family. Now, for people in their family, we say uncle or auntie or cousin, whereas in our own family we say dad or mum, brother and sister. You never say dad to your uncle or say mum to your auntie. You see, this shows the clear distinction between the different families, even if they're closely related. So you have your family, your uncle's family, your auntie's family. You're all close, but there's still a distinction between you. There's still a shell around each family. By contrast, in much of the world, there's no shell around the nuclear family, or not much. It just seems normal. And just look at the names of the relationships. They call their uncles dad. They call their aunties mum. They call their cousins brother or sister. They don't make any big distinction between the different families. In fact, in much of the world, that diagram wouldn't look right at all, because there is no shell to separate them. It would look more like this, where the hearts are represented by the same colour, just a bit paler, as they get less closely related. Our food is also your food. If you're here at meal times, you eat with us, no question. Our money is also your money. We expect to share it with you if you need it. Our house is also your house. You're welcome at any time, no question. Now, I am generalizing, but there's a lot of truth in this by comparison with our society. And then there are all the neighbours and friends, lots of people who count on you and to whom you have obligations simply because you are friends and neighbours. By contrast to the melon culture, which I've just been describing, our peanut cultures in the West often look like this. Lots of individual units, just happening to be in the same bowl. And for us personally, our place in our society, our Western society, might look like this. We know a few people in different families, but that's all. We have very few relationships, really. Is it because we don't have that many real relationships that we get so interested in what I called fake relationships in the last video? Do we have those in our lives which are basically cluttering up our lives from real relationships that we could have? Let's look at that contrast again. What a huge difference. You see, this makes it so difficult for the refugee to understand us. He expects us to be like him. So we have these two sorts of society. Let's look now at the refugee society. It's one whole. It's a whole melon. It's not divided up into bits. It's a complete unit. Now, like I said previously, back at home, the refugee knew lots of people, all part of the community, and his very being was somehow intricately linked to his relationships. He wasn't just an individual who happened to have lots of relationships. He felt that he was simply a segment of his society. He was a part of a much greater whole. In the West, the philosophers say, I think, therefore I am. In much of the world, they would say, we are, therefore I am. We are is much more important than I am. I'm just a small part of something which is much bigger than me, something that I'm very proud of. But I owe my identity to the whole. I'm totally connected to every other person in that society. Without all the others around me, I'm lost. So what's happened to the refugee? He's been cut out of his society. He's been extracted. And so he's lost his identity because he's no longer a part of it. And he's looking for a new society to fit into. He probably has in mind that there's probably another sort of melon culture that he can fit into. But there isn't one. It doesn't exist. All there is a peanut culture where he doesn't really fit. He has nowhere to belong, and he feels terribly alone. He's come from one society and expects to fit into the other one. He may have no idea that the Western society is all subdivided into small family units. He's expecting a society like this. He may think that his lonely heart should fit into a society like this, where he'll naturally have lots of relationships. But the reality is that he faces a society like this. Where can he fit in? How can he fit in? If the refugee is really to integrate with us and not retreat into some sort of ghetto, then there's no chance that he will find a community just like the one that he left behind. But to heal his broken heart, he needs new relationships. New relationships in different generations. He needs new cousins, if you like. New uncles, new aunts, new grandparents, new grandchildren. He needs new relationships to help to heal his broken heart. I believe there is a way for the refugee to get some of these new relationships, and you hold the key. The result will not be as complete as what he left behind, but it will start to heal his broken heart. How can that happen? Listen carefully. Well, it starts with you. He gets to know and trust you. And he begins to relate to you as something like a brother or sister. Well, you have maybe family, friends that you know that are close to you. You can introduce him to them. So it's like as though he gets some new brothers or sisters or nephews or nieces or mums and dads, or perhaps I should say uncles and aunties, people that he can relate to. You might want to encourage some of your family and friends to watch this series of videos to help them to understand how important their contribution can be in helping to heal the broken heart of the refugee and to help him to fit into our peanut culture. In these videos we've concentrated on the refugee's heart. In the next video we'll start looking at a much broader perspective, and I hope you'll join me. Thank you.